Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parasha Talk. This is going to be the first edition of Kayitz Alpayim Esrim V'Shtayim, even though it was Shavua Tzeved last week, the staff week. This is the first week of all the Chanichim. We want to say a special Shabbat Shalom to all of the new and returning campers at Machane Ramah in the Berkshires, where we started this Parsha Talk, I guess, we think about 10 years ago, and I'm wearing the shirt, Thou Shalt Watch Parsha Talk, okay, which can be yours for, I don't know, $35 if you want one. We'll have to send you there. With me, my good friends, Rabbi Barry Chesler, who was also at camp for a lot of years. Rabbi German Kalmanowski, who was at camp for a lot of years, but not as much as Barry and me.
Not as much as you guys, but I have this little mala in my corner. Hello, Shaya. Hello, Delia. If you hear me on Kol Ramah 102.3 FM, as you walk by the Chad Arochel, wishing you a good Shabbos, and I love you.
You still have kids there. Oh, Barry and we graduated, I guess. But I miss it. You miss it.
Gesher, and Odelia is a counselor in Bogreen.
Unbelievable.
The B-side.
So much. Want to be there, and we are so happy for all of the Chanichim who are there, especially those from our respective communities. Shout out to Highland Park, New Jersey people and Machane Ramah. Barry, shout out to
the Shachter community of Long Island.
All of whom are special, and of course the entire Machane is special to us, as is the Torah, and as is this amazing Parsha. This amazing Parsha. Korach. Before we start Korach, okay, I just want to get the emotions out, okay? And maybe to just start, before we get to that, I want to say we're at a moment, the crisis in the desert has happened already. I could describe it as a great rupture. The episode with the scouts, the spies, happened last week. They went, they reported. This was a moment of real crisis. And from that moment, we have Israel essentially sentenced in the desert to die in the desert for the complete period of 40 years. It will be another 38 years before the terminus of this generation. So we are starting on a kind of sad note. And then the Parsha begins, and we're going to do this a little differently. We're going to look at it, inside the text, verse by verse. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi v'Datan v'Aviram b'nei Elivav v'On ben Pelet b'nei Ruven. So we are introduced to the character of Korach. So the text says, Korach, son of Yitzhar, son of Kahat, son of Levi. Question number 1. So who is Korach? And question number 1a. What's his relationship to Moses? Question 1b. Who are these people, Datan, Aviram, Eliav, and On? And then question really 2 is what's bothering them. So let's just identify the players here on this drama. I think it's like an opera here. If I had the talent, I would write the opera Korach versus Moses, or Korach, I guess. Barry, I want to start with you. So please identify Korach for us and tell us his relationship to Moses, and maybe flesh out, if we could find what's bothering him.
So Korach is the first cousin of Moshe. Moshe, as we know, is the great leader of Bnei Israel. He is a Levite by family, a great-grandson of Levi, the patriarch of the tribe. And Korach also is a great-grandson of Levi.
So to clarify, there are 3 main families of the Levites, right?
So Gershom, Merari, and Kahat. This is the Kahati branch. And Kahat had, I think, 4 sons. I can't remember offhand. And Moses is the son of Amram, and Korach is the son of Yitzhar. And I think that, one of my favorite fields of inquiry is the medieval British history. I love the monarchy and how different things played out. And one is often reminded in that period of time that being born second is not a bonus.
Yeah.
And may actually be a liability. And when you are born into a family where primogeniture is the only way to succeed, when you're second best, the only way that you could get to be number one is through death. Sometimes one that's hastened by human hand, sometimes illness, sometimes accident, whatever it might be. And the problem is that if we grant Moses his right to be leader as being chosen by God, it is kind of curious from a sociological point of view that the next most important person in the community is his older brother. That seems to be nepotism. And even though we could dress it up and say, well, the God that chose Moses also chose Aaron, that doesn't always sit so well on the ground. You have one guy, he's in charge, we accept that, but why is his brother the next in charge?
Just before we continue with that idea, so Korach is not the only person in this cohort. Jeremy, talk about the others.
Excuse me for a little coughing there. I happen to be, after 2.5 years, just tested positive for COVID. I'm fine. I know you're all worried about me, but
We are worried about you.
I really, it's just a mind. It's really, I've been very lucky. I know obviously
You
people
only have half of the virus.
I have a vi, not the whole virus, just the vi.
And not vid.
Vid. I know people have been very sick. I've been blessed. That's not true for me, but forgive my coughing. So anyway, this story is an excellent example, about how academic Bible scholarship recognizes that sometimes two things have been stitched together.
Okay.
Two sources maybe have been put into a single story. And this is one of the parade examples. And if people want to read the book, Who Wrote the Bible by Richard Elliott Friedman, this is one of his parade examples, that you have two stories which have kind of been stitched into one. One of them is about the Levite rebellion of Moshe's first cousin, as Barry said. But there's another kind of people and another set of people who are a little bit displaced in the course of Israel in their journey. And that is the physical firstborns. As Barry said, physical firstbornhood typically in many societies, like I just think about, Prince George and his younger brother and his younger sisters, like, yeah, big brother's going to be the king one day. What do you mean? That's not fair. But the other people who are upset are Bnei Reuven. Reuven is the firstborn of Jacob. And earlier in the book of Bamidbar, there was a kind of a substitution that the first set of people who were supposed to work in the temple and do all the ritual stuff were the physical firstborns. And they were replaced by the Levite clan. So you have the Levites who think that the Kohanim atop the rest of the Levim doesn't seem fair. And then you have the other story of Datan, Aviram, and On Ben Pelet. They're from like another set of people who might have a claim to power, and they've been displaced by the Levite clan. So I think that the Torah, generally speaking, has this inclination to tell a story about people who deserve, by dint of their gifts, their charisma, their skill, not their birth, not their position, to take leadership. The people who get displaced are naturally unhappy about it, and we can say Moses and Aaron, that's who God chose. That's terrific. But you can certainly understand, exactly as Barry said, you can understand why people on the ground might think the fix is in. This is not fair.
It's interesting, I don't have very many associations with Kahat and that line through from Levi, other than what their labor portion was in the transportation of the Mishkan. But we do have many associations with Ruvain, and Ruvain does not comport himself well in the Joseph stories. He looks pretty much like a fool. He also tried to usurp his father's position in that often read but seldomly translated part where he sleeps with his father's concubine. So we have four.
Right, but
yeah,
Elliot, you have to also mention though, and Reuven does not comport himself well, but Shimon and his brother Levi are also guilty of
of a
genocide,
massacre.
of mass murder, shall we say, and Levi seems to be able to be resurrected.
Levi, okay, so we could leave that discussion for another time, but Levi, has, maybe when we get to Pinchas, we'll talk about zeal, and Levi seems to have an extraordinary talent for the zeal. So we have four principles here: Korach, Datan, Aviram, and On. We know nothing about On. Okay,
His name means
On.
son.
Okay, and next verse: Vayikum lifnei Moshe v'anashim ibnei Yisrael. They go before Moses, and there are men of the children of Israel, chamishim u'matayim, 250, nisi'e eda kri'e moed anshe Shem. So 250 machers, 250 important people are also in this course. So now we're not talking about just four principles. We're talking about, a whole shul's worth of people. I mean, my shul, we said about 400. So imagine you have 250 people, 254 people, and you're Moshe, and people, and they're coming at him, and it's not like, well, next verse, Vayikahalu al Moshe v'al Aaron. They're coming after Moshe and Aaron. Vayomru alehem, and they say to them, Rav lachem. Translate, it's too much for you, right? Or are they going, Rav lachem, Rav? Are they? Is it a protest movement, or is it on behalf of the delegation of 254 people? We are.
I read it as maybe a little bit more Tony Soprano. I think neither Ha'am, Doresh, Tzedek Chevrati, that like the people demand social justice, and it's not like no justice, no peace. It's more a veiled threat. Like, I think you've been accumulating a little bit too much power here, Mr. Moses. No, you got a nice people here. Shame if something happened to it.
So I'm not sympathetic to Korach and the cohort, but for the sake of study and for the sake of building the community and listening, does he have a point? Is there? Can we give Korach a little bit of credit? Is he justified? And under what grounds? And maybe it's a broader question, which is, at some a leader, and whether it's in the political realm or in the religious realm, it's very rare that there's unanimity behind the leader. Okay, we were talking about Lincoln, the greatest president. Okay, FDR, among the top, and both of those presidents and many others who are well loved and beloved had significant oppositions. In fact, Lincoln, had an opposition that he paid for with his life. Barry, you're inclined to this kind of, thinking about, is it natural to have unanimity, or where would you,
So I think it's instructive this week, especially when many of us are thinking about the Supreme Court, to recall John Marshall was the first great Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And in the beginning years of his very long tenure, he insisted that there be unanimous verdicts of the court. And for many years, all the opinions were unanimous. And as we know, ultimately, that did not last. Even under Marshall's tenure, some of the great decisions were not unanimous. And I think that we often think that in a body politic, that there needs to be unanimity. But what's more important for a body politic is for people who disagree with each other to learn how to live with each other. Because we can't be kicking people out every time we disagree with them, or if we're on the losing side, be kicked out ourselves. And the other thing I wanted to say here is that we lose sight sometimes of the great beauty of the language of the Torah. So the 250 men are called Nesi'im, and their complaint about Moses and Aaron is that they titnasu. They lifted themselves up above people who are already lifted up in order to take power, which for the rebellious people, what we call rebellious people, they did not have the right to. And I think that as we were discussing before the show began, that living in the present, there's always a great deal of uncertainty because we don't know how the story is going to turn out. And the credit that we give Korach is that people are not necessarily happy and they need a way to channel their discontent. Whether Korach chose the best way to channel that discontent, perhaps there is room for argument, but that people have to be able to protest in some meaningful way, I think is beyond dispute.
Well, I mean, so if you would want a peaceful resolution to this story, you know, what would you have created a parliament? Would you have created an assembly and put Moses in the governing party and Korach in the opposition? I mean, because the text and then the tradition, truly elaborates on this. Korach doesn't come out well here. This is demagoguery. This is he is only interested in himself and not the future of the people.
I think that his basic argument needs to be addressed. It's a political argument. Why are you the leaders of our community? And the answer is because God chose us. Korach, though, is a member of the elite. He's not interested in the people that he represents. He's interested in power. In other words, it would have been a better claim for him, I think, to say, we have 12 tribes. Let's choose one person from one of these other tribes to be leader. But instead, he himself is from a privileged tribe, and he's just quarreling with Moses because in the world of privilege, he's second best. But what about the other 11 tribes? If we just, and that would be the Reuvenite argument, I think. Well, here we are also from a privileged tribe.
The 250 are representatives of the other tribes, no?
Well, they're Nisiim, though. So the question is, how do we want to read that? Are they members of Amcha? Or are they, again, the privileged elite within the system? And here
I think of what would have been necessary behind the scenes prior to this delegation before the Torah makes it out to look spontaneous, but you just don't bring 250 notables into the central square of your camp without kind of messaging somehow. There has to be some kind of conspiracy here going on.
I'd like to run a couple of maybe odd angles on this. One is we're accustomed to saying there's 600,000 men and 2 million people and 250 people, like big deal, right? Like you can wait that one out. This is not like this is not like a million people are massed at the White House gates. Although maybe we say that the comparable numbers are like whatever. How many people were there on January 6th? Like 5,000 or something like that. In the scope of the United States, it's not very big. Breaking windows at the Capitol, it's a really big deal. Maybe we think of it like that. Maybe we think of this as, in a good, Marxist kind of way. It's the haute bourgeoisie who are rebelling against the feudal powers, right? Like the people who have some power are rebelling against the people who have lots of power, but none of it touches the people who don't have almost any power. But the other thing I was going to say is that there's an idea in anthropology, and we talk about it sometimes with respect to Purim, that cultures need moments of subversion. That cultures pressure builds up, and you need safety valves to release some of the pressure. And so you have these carnivals. Like this is a feature of European society. It's a feature of like tribal societies. The anthropologist Victor Turner wrote about this and used the term communitas. There are moments when normal social structures break down, and people who seem to have powerless get to act like they're in charge. And the king becomes the fool becomes the king. In Jewish tradition, we have the Purim Rav tradition, like the dummy in town gets to act like the rabbi. And I feel like at some level, one of the things that's going on is a communitas kind of moment that Korach is exploiting the natural pressure. Moshe is a great leader. He's the greatest leader. He's the greatest Jew who ever lived. Actually, we want Moshe to be the leader. And even if Moshe is the leader, sometimes you get mad at the leader because, there's just a kind of social pressure that's going to build up, and people need to let off steam about their own feeling of being marginalized or passed over. And so even though Korach, I think, is, a manipulative, nasty guy, I think that there are things in his rhetoric that don't sound right. I also think that he gives voice to some thumbing your nose at the power structure that is inherently healthy if limited. The Kutzker Rebbe famously called called Korach unser heilige Zaydi. He's our holy grandfather, because he gave a shtach to the power structure, and he released something that might be channeled, an energy that might be channeled in a good way.
Okay, so there is some legitimacy to his claim that people are going to be wandering. People have no future. These people are going to die in the desert. There is a vulnerability at this moment with Moses and Aaron. The leadership has failed them. Or don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but Moses, his reaction, Vayipol al panav, he falls on his face. How we read that is a subject to many different interpretations. And then he challenges, he speaks to Korach and the cohort and saying, Boker, tomorrow morning, V'yoda Adonai et kasher lo, and God will make known who is his, Et HaKadosh b'kriv elav, who will be brought near to him, V'et asher yivchar bo yakriv elav, and who he chooses will be coming close. Zot asu, kechu lachem maktot Korach v'chol arato. This is what you need to do. Everyone take your fire pans and put fire in them, put incense in them. You come and we'll see. Now, if we are attentive to the biblical precedent, we know that this is a very strong challenge, because the last time someone else tried to put a strange fire in their fire pan, they were incinerated. So this is really a mortal challenge. Everything is on the line here. And so that is going to happen. We get a moment. I want to just fast forward to Datan and Aviram, who they refuse to come before the tent of meeting, and they make the following statement: Lo na'aleh, we're not coming. Hamad ki elitanu mi'eretz avat chalav udvash. Was it, Hamat?
Was it no big deal?
Was it no big deal that you took us out of the land flowing of milk and honey? In other words, you took us out of Egypt, the land flowing with milk and honey, la mitenu bamidbar, to make us die in the desert, ki tistarer aleinu gam tistarer, and you're going to lord over us too? And they continue and say, Af lo el eretz avat chalav udvash havita. You didn't bring us into the land of milk and honey. Vatitan lano nachalat tzadeh v'ker. You didn't give us a field and a vineyard. Hainei anashim ha'em tenaker lo na'aleh. You're going to poke out our eyes, and we're not coming. Poke out our eyes is a reference to enslavement. It's a lovely digression, which we won't get to. But here, look at. I mean, this is the shtoch. This is the punch in the gut.
God, in these Bible passages, the one thing that is guaranteed to make God mad is, let's just go back to Egypt. Egypt was better. Let's turn around. The powerful vibe is throughout these stories is, I've put you on a path towards something incredibly noble, important, your destiny. And when people say, destiny, I would like some melons, please. When I sat by the Nile, there was melons, there was garlic.
Fish.
All I had to do was stick my net down in the Nile, and I had lots of fish. That's more important to me than this difficult circumstance. And that just enrages God, raises emotion, and should enrage us, right? So
Yes.
when they say, you took us out of the land where we really belong, that's just the worst betrayal ever.
It just, and the reaction, of course, says it all, right? Moshe is angry. Vayichar leMoshe me'od. I mean, do you say that he loses it here? He loses it. He's angry.
No, I think you have to be fair to Moshe, that anger is not always an intemperate response to a situation.
Okay.
And sometimes it's good to be angry. And there is a healthy anger, and there's a way of manifesting your anger. He doesn't become violent. He doesn't punch anyone out. He doesn't give anyone a slap on the back that might cause them to stumble. So he is, I think the key word here is ma'od, is that this exercises Moses more than most other things.
Okay,
This
so
is,
I'm going to just, for the sake of time, he goes into this lovely, this beautiful monologue. Lo chamor echad mehem nasati. I didn't take one ass. Lo hareoti et echad mehem. I didn't wrong anybody. Okay, Jeremy, react to that.
But by the way, I just want to point out that the
Yeah.
Haftarah typically for this passage involves Samuel, when the people want a king, Saul, they want to have King Saul, and Samuel's feeling similarly judged, and God says, it's not, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And Samuel gives a very closely aligned speech. I didn't steal anything from you. There's a sort of an assumption that we expect political leaders to be kind of self-interested and greedy, right? The previous president of the United States may have sort of like, I'm a great businessman. I made a lot of money for myself. That's why you should have, like, you trust the guy to not, be self-interested. Moses says the typical thing that you expect, the bad thing that you expect from a leader, I haven't done it all. I have not taken your property. I have not enriched myself.
Wow. Okay, so fast forward. They're set up for this this face-off. God says to Moshe and Aaron, "Hibadlu mitoch ha'edah, separate yourselves from them. V'achaleh otam keraga, I'm going to destroy them. Vayiplu apneihem, and Moses and Aaron fall on their faces. Vayomer El Elohei haruchot lechol basar, God, the God of the universe, God of all the winds, for all humanity. Ha'ish echad yichata v'al kol ha'edah tiktsof." You gotta give it to them, Moshe and Aaron. Is one person going to sin and God going to take it out on everybody? That's audacious. That's remarkable, right?
well, it reminds us of the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, because this is the same argument that Abraham makes. Will you destroy the innocent with the wicked? And of course, God makes clear to Abraham in that story that he's just going to destroy the wicked.
Right.
And I think that, part of the storyline here is that evil has to be vanquished. It can't be allowed to percolate within a society, because ultimately it will destroy it from within.
But for this reason, this is like the golden calf episode. It is like Stone Valmorah, but it is also like the golden calf episode when God says, I'm going to wipe them out and start again with you, Moshe. And Moshe says, this is not about me. This is about them. This is about the collective of Israel. And you do have to deal, God, with the evildoers, but you can't wipe out the community, because this is what it's all about. So in the golden calf episode, the vibe seems, there's a little more developed story, and the vibe seems to be that God is like, inviting Moshe to argue back. So if we can read this episode through that episode, that it sounds like, okay, that's it, I'm gonna kill him. And Moses and Aaron say, no, don't kill them all, let's just keep it together. We still got a plan, we still got a mission, but you're gonna have to punish the ones who are themselves guilty.
Okay, so almost as if the earth is reacting on cue, Moses says the earth is going to, this is going to be the demonstration. The earth will open up its mouth and swallow you. And in fact, the earth opens up its mouth and swallows them. And then a fire comes out and consumes the 250. And let's, as a dramatic and explosive that moment is, let's go to the kind of the postscript, which is, God says to Moses, "Emor el Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen, tell Elazar, who's Aaron's son, Vayarem et hamachtot mi ben hasirfa, take the fire pans. These are bronze fire pans. Ve'et ha'esh zrei hala kikadeshu, and take the fire, or whatever's left of them, because they're holy." And then what basically he says is, you gotta plate them onto the altar. Zikaron livnei Israel, as a memorial to the children of Israel. Laman asher lo yikrav ish zar, which rings on our bell, esh zar. Ish zar is a foreign person, or the wrong kind of person is not allowed to come to close to the holy precincts. Asher lo mizera Aaron, someone who's not of the seed of Aaron. What do you make of that moment? And what do you make of the plating of the fire pans? And maybe in general, what do you make of the fact that the temple, or the sanctuary, has these kinds of relics, these reminders? I was thinking like, okay, so as a kind of Bible quiz question, what are the relics that are in the sanctuary that remind things of the past? So starting with the Aron HaKodesh, the Aron HaBrit. So you have the tablets and the broken tablets. You have the jar of manna. You have this now, the plate, the bronze fire pans that are plated to the walls of the Mizbeach. In the next story, you're going to get Aaron's rod, which is going to be placed in the sanctuary. So, I mean, we're not big on reliquary stuffs, right? Relics in Judaism. You go to some Christian cathedrals and you'll see all sorts of relics, but relics are important. And not only that, but they do tell a story here. So
that's what you said about the storytelling seems to me very on point. One of the things that, like, icon loving Christians, like Eastern Christians like icons more than Western Christians, and one of the explanations that icon loving Christians say is that the icons tell a story to an illiterate populace. They don't have a book, they do have a picture. And so that strikes me as like the Sinsenet Man, the Omer of Man, is the particularly great one. Or the jar of man, or the Aaron's flowering staff. You got stuff that you can, okay, leave aside the question of where people could go, or what was before the Lord, or what was in the public area, or whatever. But you have items which can tell a story, and I find that pretty touching.
So what I would add here, though, is that the machtot here, the pans, are equivalent to the broken tablets. That you cannot, and this brings us back to the beginning of Sefer Bereshit, the book of Genesis, where God recognizes early on, even God cannot start over. That history means something, and you cannot escape history. And in fact, as we saw here a little bit earlier, you cannot start over every time you make a mistake. That your past is part of who you are, and you have to be mindful of it. You could change your future, but you can't really change your past. And if you think you're going to change it, you're going to doom yourself to a future that is not going to be so glorious.
I'm just reminded, yesterday or 2 days ago, the Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup. So I was listening to the CBC, and they said they were talking about the fact that they were parading the cup. It's a big, important moment. It's the greatest moment in sport, right? The coveted trophy, the Holy of Holies. Okay, so what do you think happened? First 5 minutes that the Colorado team is parading around with the cup, somebody drops it. Okay, and they have a dent. There's a dent in the cup now. Okay, so the question is, do you fix the dent? And if you fix the dent, can you make it like there's no dent there? Or do you keep the dent in the cup because the cup is full of dents?
Is there actually one Stanley Cup? It's not.
There are two Stanley Cups. But the real cup gets given to the team, and then when the real cup is given, I think somebody will watch this and correct me on this. The other cup is in the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto. I've seen it. I've taken a picture.
So the teams get to keep it for a year and then pass it to somebody else.
Not a whole year, but every member of the team gets to have the cup one day. And there's a special employee of the National Hockey League that's the cup minder. He goes around. He's like the Shomer Stanley Cup. he, he,
Oh, Stanley to you, Elliot.
he goes, he is the guy that's brings it in like a big suitcase, okay, and he parks himself outside, and all the players get to make barbecues and pour champagne in it, and that's the tradition. The tradition is that every player on the team gets to have one day with the cup, and of course legends have arisen as to what they have done with the cup.
So if a
Okay.
Jewish guy won the cup and he wanted to have barbecues and drink champagne out of it, he'd have to kosher it first.
He'd have to kosher the cup. That's right.
He can make kiddush out of it.
But the point is, back to the things become holy, right? And I can't, obviously there are lots of different examples, but it's an iconic moment, and of course the thing that makes it holy is that holies and quotes is that every team that's ever won the cup has their names of all of their players engraved on the cup, right? And that you look at the cup and you see all these great players on it. That's what makes it special.
This is just first of all, this is fascinating. Obviously, it's got to mean that they add lower levels. Maybe
They do, and they replace them, etc. Yeah.
But the inscription of names and like every culture, in this case, we can call you as a Canadian, and I don't know anything about hockey. I've never my love of sports is just kind of like saturated with.
Think of ballet and murder. That's hockey.
And it's got to be weird, by the way, for a Tampa Bay team. Like what? That's not a hockey team. Whatever. But
no. Once the Montreal Canadiens are out, no, there's no interest in it.
But
sorry, David Wise, Toronto Maple Leafs.
Last Cup 67. But every culture has items, objects, whatever that they invest with their specialness and their tradition, and so. We have some of these things. I love what Barry said about the history of breakage, the history of wreckage and mistakes,
Nice,
also finding their way into the sacred. Absolutely. I think that's amazing, and that's religious maturity. If you just say, oh, all of our people were perfect and nobody ever sinned and there's never any dents in the cup and nobody ever worshipped the golden calf.
Okay, we're a couple of minutes over, but wait a second. We're talking to the Ramah group also, in addition to our 200 loyal viewers and listeners. So there are some important relics at Machane Ramah in the Berkshire. I'm thinking of the Adir Kavodo,
the toilet seat,
which has a place in the Chadar Ochel.
When I drove Shaya up the other day, in the big ulam in the gym, there's the different Yom Sport paintings.
That's what I mean. Yeah, the plaques.
The plaques, but also the paintings that the kids
paintings,
have done.
Right.
And there's more that I hadn't seen before, and I thought that's a kind of a historical thing that
absolutely. All right.
So one last word. So there's a great saying of Reb Nachman of Braslov that there is nothing so whole as a broken heart. And this brings us back to the beginning of our conversation, because what we're looking for is not unanimity, but community. There is unity and community, but not unanimity. Yeah. And the reason why we have at this juncture the Machtot as part of the Mishkan is because that too is part of who we are. And we cannot, we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for life as it is lived, for good and for bad.
Amen. What a great way to end. And want to thank all of our viewers, all of our listeners. Big shout out again. Machane Ramah. Have a wonderful Shabbat, everyone. And we'll enjoy seeing and talking to you again on the next edition of Parasha Talk. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.